I thought about uploading this around Father's Day for, the sentiment, but your boy really needs to upload. But anyways, God of War Kratos, The Last of Us Joel, Invincible, Omni-Man. What do these fictional characters have in common? Is it how they have been shown to be an unstoppable force in their series? Is it the troubled past and dynamic arcs each of them go through? Is it the rebellious teenager they are accompanied with to look after? Or is it the basic bad dad becomes a good story arc that these father figures go through? If you answered yes to all those questions, then you would be right, but I feel as if these three in particular stand out in a way. Let's explore my last question. Is it the basic bad dad becomes good story arc that these father figures go through? While yes, you can apply it to all three of these characters, I feel as if that question is way too broad when describing them and what they've gone through. When researching this video, I read an article titled "The Bad Dad Redemption Arc Needs to Die." Now, my first time reading the title of that article, it immediately piqued my interest, as I feel as if most father figure arcs where they're originally bad but then they end up redeeming themselves with their child or family at the end, typically for the most part are written well. So I read the article, and while I didn't entirely agree with something stated, the author Nino Chipri made valid points that I somewhat resonated with. One point in particular is Chipri talks about how a lot of dads who have a complicated, neglectful relationship with their child or juvenile figure end up having a change of heart and show an uncharacteristic display of affection and then die, typically in a sacrificial way, essentially avoiding all forms of accountability in the end. And honestly, I kind of agree with that. Not necessarily that it's bad, but just how often we see it inside of media and movies. An example of this would be the relationship between Yondu and Peter Quill from Guardians of the Galaxy. Yondu isn't the nicest person and oftenly treats Peter like garbage, ends up sacrificing himself for Peter by the end of Volume 2. Another example would be Darth Vader, who killed kids, destroyed planets, cut off his own son's hand, but ends up sacrificing himself and not facing the repercussions of everything that he's done. Another example would be Vegeta from Dragon Ball Z, who has potentially killed billions of people. And yes, he is redeemed by becoming a family man and being less cold-hearted. I really believe that he's rarely faced repercussions of anything that he's done in his past. And again, I'm not saying any of these characters are bad in particular. I'm just saying most case scenarios when it comes to a bad dad becoming good, it always ends up with them sacrificing themselves through death. The three I mentioned earlier though, Kratos, Joel, and Omni-Man, I feel are different though. Despite having committed atrocities, what separates them from the rest is that they actually have to live and endure choices and consequences instead of dying as an escape. Kind of. Just stick with me. In this video, I want to explore these three characters and why I believe they are some of the best written dads in fiction. I will be talking about some major plot points inside each of these series, so if you're not a fan of spoilers, here's your warning. So let's start with Joel, the most human out of the three. Before Joel was a father figure for Ellie, he was just surviving. After the death of his daughter Sarah and the collapse of everything around him, Joel basically shut himself off from the world. He became cold, violent, and emotionally numb. Someone who did whatever it took to make it through the day. Then he met Ellie. At first, she was just a job, just cargo to move from one place to another. But as they traveled together through cities, trauma, and loss, something inside of him started to change. Ellie wasn't just a mission, she was a reminder of everything he'd buried slowly, painfully, and he began to care again. Joel had someone to look after now. Ellie basically filled that hole in him. He started to laugh, he started to protect, he started to feel like a father again. But Joel's redemption doesn't come through doing the right thing, which I think adds an extra layer to this character which makes him so popular in this series. When Joel learns that Ellie is going to be killed to create a cure, he does not let that slide. He tears through the hospital, kills doctors, the Fireflies, and anyone who gets in his way. And all these people that Joel kills have lives of their own, and they're simply just trying to create a cure for humanity in these desperate times. But Joel takes it into his own hands and makes a decision that really isn't his. He chooses one life over the world, which is very selfish, and he quite frankly never really apologizes for it. In The Last of Us Part 2, we learn that Ellie eventually figures it all out. The relationship is damaged, maybe permanently, but even then Joel tries to rebuild it. He teaches her to play guitar, he opens up, he tries to make things right, not with some grand gesture, but by simply being there. And even in their final conversation in the game, when Ellie tells him she wants to try to forgive him, that's when we see the real Joel, not the killer, not the liar, just a dad. Joel eventually and sadly dies before they ever fully make peace. No redemption arc tied up with the neat little bow. But in his final moments, Joel dies having found something worth protecting, something worth loving again. He wasn't a good man, but through Ellie, he became a better one. And for Joel, that was enough. The reason why this sticks out so well and why so many people love Joel is because his entire arc is so grounded and realistic. All of his actions are rooted in grief, which I feel like a lot of us as humans can relate to. And Joel's arc doesn't necessarily focus on moral redemption. It is more emotional than anything. Let's move on to our next character, Kratos, from the God of War series. I'm pretty sure we all know what Kratos did before the events of God of War 2016 took place. He was a man consumed by so much rage and blinded by vengeance, and soaked in the blood of his enemies, and unfortunately his own family too, as he was tricked into killing his own wife and daughter, which will permanently and forever stain him, literally, because the reason why Kratos' skin is white is because those are the ashes of his original wife and daughter, which sent him on the journey of basically killing all the gods of Olympus. And he was the physical form of pure wrath. We already know the gods in God of War were terrible people, but he didn't destroy Olympus to save the world and the people from these terrible gods, but because of so much hatred he had for them. And by the end of the series, the world is essentially doomed, as it cannot function without all the gods that Kratos killed. But then he disappears. Years pass, the ash settles, and we meet him again in God of War 2018. He's no longer that screaming god of vengeance. He's older, quieter, living in the woods, and he has a son named Atreus. And suddenly, Kratos, the ghost of Sparta, is faced with something far more terrifying than Ares or Zeus: parenting. And at first, when it came to Atreus, he's very cold, distant. He hides in his past, he grunts more than he speaks, but over the course of their journey, we start to see something incredible. Kratos is trying to become a different and better person. We see that this new lifestyle Kratos is trying to achieve is really nurtured by his new wife as well, Faye. We don't know really much about Faye at all, including how or when she died, but we do know that she was a big part of Kratos' redemption journey. He's trying not to be the same kind of father his own was. He's trying not to let his son become the kind of monster that he used to be, and he's trying to break the cycle of gods creating pain and sons becoming weapons, which honestly, the world itself can use right now. And that's what I feel like is so good about Kratos' arc, is because he's not asking for forgiveness and not pretending the past didn't happen. He's just trying day by day to become something better than he was yesterday. A line that is said by both Kratos and eventually picked up by Atreus is not to be sorry, but to be better, which I think fits this entire arc so well. By the time God of War Ragnarok comes around, Kratos has really changed, especially in the DLC. He's no longer running from his past, he faces it and he owns it. And when the time comes to choose between godly power and peace, he chooses peace. He finally becomes the father he never had. Kratos doesn't just redeem himself through action, he redeems himself through restraint, through love. Not by killing gods, except for Heimdall, but by raising a son who doesn't have to. And that's why I think this whole entire redemption arc, especially as a father, is so compelling, because it's also like a interpretation of generational curses and how Kratos is the one stepping up to break it. And yes, while he does slip up at times, it's about not being sorry, but being better. Kratos shows us what redemption looks like when it's earned. Slowly, painfully, over time, a man who once destroyed worlds now devotes his life to protecting just one person, his son. But what if the father never earned the love in the first place? What if instead of protecting his child, he nearly killed him? Introducing our next and final character, Omni-Man. Omni-Man wasn't just a bad dad, he was never supposed to be a father at all, and when the truth came out, the damage was almost irreversible. Nolan Grayson, also known as Omni-Man, wasn't sent to Earth to protect it, he was sent to conquer it. A superpowered alien from the Viltrumite Empire trained from birth to view emotions as weakness and compassion as failure. But nonetheless, Earth changes him. He marries a human, he has a son, and for most of Invincible's first season, Omni-Man plays the role of the world's greatest superhero. But behind the cape, there's no hero, only a time bomb. And when the truth of why Omni-Man was actually there comes out, it's horrifying. He murders the Guardians of the Globe, he lies to his son, and when confronted, he nearly beats Mark to death. But in that moment, Mark's statement about still having him after thousands of years really changes how Omni-Man or Nolan thinks about life. He ends up flying to a completely different planet to essentially make up for abandoning his post on Earth, and selfishly has a child knowing that he's gonna put the entire planet in danger, including all of its inhabitants. And I'm sure in that moment between going to Thraxa and being inside Viltrumite prison, Nolan was going through a complete mental warfare, choosing between his family that he's created through the past 17-18 years, or his home planet that he's practically been with for millennia. And while inside of his holding cell when captured by the Viltrumites, we hear one line that tells us how much Omni-Man has grown since then, and tells us how humanity has changed him.
I think I miss my wife.
Later on in the comics, Mark gets injured very badly, which forces Nolan and Oliver to stay on a deserted planet in order to help Mark heal from his injuries. During their time on that planet, we can really see how much Nolan has changed since his incident on Earth, as he makes it his #1 priority to not only take care of Mark to nurse him back to health, but also to get to know Oliver a little bit more, as this is one of the only times that they have really been able to talk to each other, as the last time Omni-Man had seen Oliver, he was just a baby. Another very good example of his growth can be seen through his efforts to change the Viltrumite Empire. Long story short, we learned that Nolan is the descendant of the previous ruler of the Viltrumite Empire, rightfully making him the heir to the throne. And Thrag, who is like the major antagonist of the entire series, figures this out before anyone else and tries to murder Nolan even after making a truce with them. Thrag is almost successful with killing Nolan, but at the right time, all the rest of the Viltrumites show up and learn the truth, and they all bow to him, now knowing that that's their true king. And when Nolan was asked what they should do with Thrag, instead of sentencing him to death despite trying to actually kill Nolan, he decides to exile him instead, which I think speaks echoes about how much this man has been through and how much he has changed. On top of that, when it comes to his inauguration speech with the rest of the Viltrumites, he decides to enact a change inward instead of outward with the Viltrumite Empire. Instead of being a race that conquers other planets in order to increase their own numbers, what he decides to do is to enact a more peaceful one, and tells the rest of the Viltrumites to embrace Earth and its people. This is when I feel like Kratos and Omni-Man kind of cross tracks with each other, because they're trying to break this generational curse that caused nothing but death and destruction. In the end though, unfortunately, Omni-Man gets gravely injured to the point where his heart is damaged and he can't heal properly. He ends up telling Mark that he wants him to rule the Viltrum Empire next and that he's the perfect fit for it. And he says that what Viltrum needs is Mark's compassion. His compassion for peace and not the way of an angry warrior like the Viltrumites were. And that's exactly what Mark does. Not only does he become emperor, he also decides to make Viltrumites more of a service for other planets like Nolan said he originally was at Earth 4. Omni-Man's redemption was definitely a lengthy one. And what makes it different from the rest is it's the least complete, the most painful, and the most uncertain one out of all of them. It's not about being forgiven, it's about earning the right to even try again. And even Omni-Man realizes that he doesn't deserve any sort of forgiveness for anything that he's done on Earth, but he still chooses to do better anyway. But yeah, that's essentially my analysis on these three characters' redemption arcs, and why they're so compelling and liked by many audiences. I would like to hear your guys' opinions about the dads I just mentioned, as well as any others that weren't mentioned inside this video. Oh, and I really want to thank you guys for getting me to 1,000 subs. I know it's not a lot, but it's a milestone that's been in my mind since last year, and I know a lot of my traction came from shorts definitely, but it's still crazy to think about. Anyways, I hope you guys have a good day and peace.